Hi, everybody. This is Level Up Your Game Development Hobby. I'm going to be talking to you today about how to start a sole proprietorship, also known as a DBA, a lot of the time, and just some of the things you should think about when you're starting your own business, when you want to start selling your games, or if you want to start voice acting even, maybe you want to have a little bit more structure in place. And this is just going to be a brief introduction for you. I will let you know that there are a lot of great resources available to help you a lot more with this, including Empire State Development. The IRS actually has a great guide for small businesses that are self-employed. And the US Small Business Administration has a lot of really good business guides. And we have some really, really awesome resources locally. There are some great chambers of commerce. The New York State Small Business Development Center is actually right on UAlbany campus. It's in the E-Tech building, the new building with the best parking on campus. So that's a win. And there's a site called the Community Loan Fund of the Capital Region. And they have a lot of information about local loans for businesses and how to write your business plan and things like that. I'll pop these slides in the Discord for everybody too, so that you can have them. There's also some information, I don't know if it's still out there, on the table that was just outside. I picked up some of the brochures and stuff from the Small Business Development Center, like how to write your business plan and how to do some of those other things. All right. So why am I giving this talk? I run a business called Toner Tutoring. I've been teaching and tutoring for over 20 years, which is really difficult when I'm only 25, right? No, that's not true at all. I did start my own business in about 2006, and I graduated from the Rensselaer County Smart Up Entrepreneurship Program, which I'm not entirely sure has recovered from COVID. But I also did get my MBA, my Master's in Business Administration, from the Albany Weekend MBA program. I think it's now called the MBA for Executives Program, 2013. So I know a little bit about running a business, but I will tell you, I'm not a lawyer. Okay, if you have legal questions about your business, please go see a professional. I'm also not an accountant. I did work for the controller's office for many years, and I know a good deal about accounting. But again, see a professional if that is what you need. And I am a little bit wacky, but I think that was probably evident by now. So if you want to start a business, here's what we're going to go over. 4 little things. How to choose a form of business or your legal organization, finding a name, getting your bank account, and then filing your taxes. Everybody's favorite thing in the world, right? Yeah. So one of the things that I think people should think about if you're thinking of being an entrepreneur, starting your own business, honestly, it's not for everybody, right? Some people really need the structure of someone else running the show. And the small business guide that New York State Empire State Development puts out, which has a big QR code here for you if you want to grab it. Again, I'll put this all in the Discord, though, so you can get it later. This is an excellent guide to starting a business in New York State, and it has a checklist in it that basically says, okay, are you comfortable with running a lot of tasks at once? Are you comfortable with having maybe uncomfortable conversations with other people? So it goes through a checklist of different things that you might need as an entrepreneur, as a solo person running a business. And it just gives you some guidance that if you check like 5 or 6 yeses, you're probably pretty good to go. If you check 5 or 6 no's, you probably need some other people on your team to help you out. So highly recommend that as a resource for you. But once you've decided, all right, I think I want to be an entrepreneur, I think I want to do my own business, I want to be my own boss. Most small businesses start off as something called a sole proprietorship. And those are fancy words for meaning it's just you. It is me, myself, and I running a business. To choose a form of business, there's a couple of different forms of business that are really common. This is from a graphic on the Small Business Administration website. Sole proprietorships, one person. The disadvantages to a sole proprietorship generally are liability things. So if something goes wrong, you can lose everything. All your personal stuff, just everything. Partnerships are 2 or more people. They're kind of like the I got a buddy I want to start a business with. And those are mostly also unlimited personal liability, which is not always what people want. But then when you want to shield some of your personal assets and have only the business assets at risk, that's when people start to get these more complicated business structures, like a limited liability company or corporation, or a normal, quote unquote, normal corporation or C Corp. In New York State, you actually need 3 people to form a corporation, so you better have at least 2 friends. And you can always upgrade to a different type of business later. So if you're not sure, filing a corporation is a pretty big obligation and has fees associated. Filing a sole proprietorship, as we will go through in just a moment, costs about $25. Maybe $50 if you want a lot of copies of your certificate. So please consult a lawyer, consult a professional if you have any questions, and if you need more information about this, especially the liability things. One of the things I like to point out to people is that if you're doing something like a game development business, the liability downside is not that high. Like, nobody's going to trip and fall on your property because you probably are going to be doing it from your home and not having people over there, right? The problem with some of these liability shielding things is that if you are negligent, meaning that you know or should have known that what you were doing was wrong, you're going to be liable anyway. So if it's just you, yourself, and you don't have other employees, sole proprietorship is really not that much of a risk for above and beyond what you would normally be liable for. In my opinion, again, not a lawyer, not your lawyer. Please don't sue me. Once you've decided that you want, this talk, by the way, the rest of this talk will be about sole proprietorships, because that's what I figure people start. Next thing you want to do, though, is choose a name. And I've listed a couple of different services here that actually run through all the different socials to tell you whether they're available or not for the name you want. So that's really convenient. There's a whole bunch of them: name check, name checker, Noam, check usernames, name check spelled out all the way. But you want to verify that your name is available the ways you want it. And maybe a variant of it as well. So like, my first name is Sarah with an H because my parents made it nice and balanced for me. But when I buy my name, I tend to buy Sarah without an H as well, because I figure people will misspell it. Do I redirect them to the one with the H? Yes, I do, because it belongs there. Thank you. The other thing you want to definitely do is test market your name. You want to show it to as many people as you can, preferably even find some like 13-year-old boys to really tear it apart. I don't know why it's always the 13-year-old boys that tear it apart, but it really is. There have been a lot of stories of companies that chose names and then realized once you write it all out in lowercase, oh, there are some bad words in there. Or I know one of the classic stories going back quite a ways is the Chevy Nova, which is a car that existed, and they tried to sell it in Spanish-speaking countries, where it was the Nova, which means it doesn't go. Maybe not the best name for a car. But test market your name. Once you've found the perfect name, you want to make sure that nobody else in your county is using it, at least if you are going with a sole proprietorship. Okay? If you're going with a corporation, you have to actually file that at a state level, so you have to make sure nobody else in New York State is using it. But if you just want your own sole proprietorship, like my Toner Tutoring, if I wanted to run under my own name, I don't need to do anything special. I can just be Sarah Lauser, and that's my business name. But I didn't want that. I wanted the fancy checks that said my business name on them. And I wanted to also kind of shield my personal life a little bit from my business, right? So I went to my county clerk's office and I got a special certificate called a DBA. And that just is also called a certificate of assumed name. And that just says, hey, this person is doing business as another person. It basically is an official alias that you get to set up. So this is actually what the Albany County form looks like. It's pretty standard throughout New York State, though. It literally is that long. It says, I certify my name is your name here. I am 18 years of age or older. If you're less than 18, you can still file it, but you have to, there's some special rules about that. You have to give your address, and you have to say that you intend to do business in the county where you're filing at an address. And then you tell them what name you want. They look it up in their files, make sure nobody else has that name. And then they say, yep, here you go. Here's your certificate. You do need to sign it in front of a notary, or just the people that work at the clerk's office are happy to witness your signature for you. All the forms say that on them too, though, so you don't need to remember that part. And once you have your awesome DBA certificate, again, I think $25 to file anywhere in New York except for New York City. New York City wants $100 to file that. And then certified copies, prices range, but they're usually about $5. Once you have that DBA certificate, you can go get your federal business tax ID, which is nice because then you don't need to put your social on things. And if you have any employees, you will need one of those. But what people really start to get concerned about is, okay, if I'm going to start my own business, how do I keep my money straight? And I'm really proud of myself for coming up with that rhyme because it took me a while. I just had it stuck in my head, but let's get down to business to keep straight our sums. It like flows so nicely with the song. Once you have your certificate, you can open your business bank account. And different places charge differently for these bank accounts. If you go to some place like Broadview, formerly known as CEFQ, they often have a free tier sort of business account where you can make up to 25 deposits a month or something like that, which is usually enough for a very small business. And you'll need to make a deposit of some sort to open any bank account, really. But once you have that bank account that's not in your name and your business name, people can write checks to your business and you can actually cash them, which is awesome. That would also be something that you would want if you're going to get like business insurance. You want to make sure that it draws against like a business account, helps you to keep all your expenses straight. So I put just a list of some of the common types of business insurance here, if that's something that you think you need for your business. Again, I run a teaching and tutoring business. I have had business insurance in the past, but it never covered what I wanted it to cover, so sometimes it's a personal decision that you make. When it comes to doing your taxes then, if you're a sole proprietor, you just fill out a Schedule C as part of your taxes. Every tax software has this built in. And it's a pretty straightforward form, which is really saying something for the IRS. They kind of got this one not bad. And if you owe tax, then there's a SE, the self-employment tax, that just calculates how much you owe. But what I would recommend for anyone who is thinking of starting to sell games, especially in New York State, New York State charges sales tax on video games. And if you want to sell directly, you need to talk to the tax department, get a sales tax number, collect sales tax on your purchases, depending on which county the person purchasing it is in. And it's a huge amount of work. If you are okay with going through a reseller instead, they can often be the merchant of record, and they take care of the sales tax with New York, and they take a little cut, of course, but it will not be as much of a headache. So I'm highlighting two different resellers here that are both very common. I know somebody in the first panel talked about itch.io. Itch.io has a really awesome model where they do open revenue sharing. So you get to choose how much of a percentage you want to use to help fund itch.io. And you can choose to have them be the merchant of record and handle all the tax stuff for you. You can also choose for some reason to have them not do that. But again, I'm not quite sure why you would want that headache. Steam is also a really popular way to list your games. And the website you'd go to that is partner.steamgames.com, but it costs $100 per game to list it. So if you are just starting out and you have a little indie game, that's a pretty steep price tag. They will send you a little 1099 form. You might not even have to fill out a Schedule C if you don't have any expenses to claim. But then the fun part of the whole taxes thing and why you might want to do a Schedule C if you're doing a small business is that your business expenses get to be subtracted from your business income before they start figuring out how much tax you owe. And I know there have been at least 2 different TV shows that have done the whole "it's a write-off" joke. But that's what a write-off is. It's basically me saying, okay, I had a really popular video game and I made $400 million on it. But in order to make that game, I spent $300 million. So I only would need to pay tax on $100 million. It would be a good problem to have, frankly. It's, like I said, it's a pretty straightforward form. It asks for just some general business information, and then asks for how much money did you bring in, and then it starts to ask for what did you spend money on, the expenses part of it. If you're using one of your new fancy business bank accounts for all of your expenses, it makes it really easy to do your taxes at the end of the year, because you just take your statement and you look through it, and there's all your expenses in one place. I use software that is intended for businesses, but again, a spreadsheet is usually free. So whatever works for you is great. Once you do that, you get to revenues, stuff you brought in, minus expenses, stuff you paid out, gives you a profit or a loss. And it's been told many times in small business seminar sort of things, oh, you can't report a loss, the IRS will audit you, it sucks. That's not quite true. If you continually report a loss, they will probably look at you and go, okay, is this a hobby or is this a business? Because businesses need to make profit eventually. But even if you're only making a couple dollars a year, it's still a business. There's a whole section on cost of goods sold, which is also called COGS, that generally is only physical merchandise. So you can just cross that section off. It's just zeros for any digital goods that you're selling. And then if you use your car to drive around places, that can be a whole other thing. That's another, it might be a headache for you if you're not driving around that much, because you do need to report the number of business miles you drove, but also the number of commuting miles you drove and the number of personal miles you drove, just other, and keep track of that through the whole year. So it's up to you again whether or not that's something that's worth your time. If you only drive a couple times a year for your business, maybe you don't want to bother. So this is a list of sample expenses that I just wanted to share with you and to show you a little bit about how things can really add up. This is actually from my personal small business, my tutoring business last year. I had over $3,500 in expenses, and I wasn't really doing that much. But when I added up, like, okay, I pay $10 a month for Office. I pay $14 a month for my accounting software and $10 a month for my mileage software. It all added up for me, and that is $3,500 that I did not need to pay taxes on then, right? So I highly recommend keeping some good records, figuring out what works for you as far as that kind of cost benefit thing. But I hope that you're not too scared about what it might take to become your own boss, at least as a small business. You can go get an awesome name for yourself. If you want to be Sarah the Magnificent, that's taken. But if you want to be something else, you can go get your own business name, get your checks with your business, and start to be a really professional organization. I will say if you want to get loans and things like that, you'll need a full business plan. That is a little bit more involved again, but basically says, how do you plan to make money and pay back this loan? There's a lot of that help from that slide at the very beginning. Right here will help with that business plan for you. And I know that our next speaker, Shay, is going to be talking about a tax credit for game development that might be less of a sole proprietor sort of thing and more of a corporation sort of thing, but it's good to know what opportunities exist in the area. There are a lot of startup funds and a lot of people that are willing to invest if you can write a good business plan about what you're planning to do and how it will benefit society, the world at large, the people who invest in you. And I will be available all day. If you have questions, you can come find me. I might say, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant. Go ask a real professional, but I'm happy to point you in good directions. And I will see you, if you are still here, for the esports panel later tonight.